It's Scale School time, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to be diving into some very, very interesting, fun topics today with Mr. Vito from the Ethereum Foundation. Hello, sir.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. Pleasure for you. Pleasure. Oh,
Pleasure
no.
for me. Yeah.
It is a pleasure for you to join us. But no, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day, your busy schedule, for jumping in and having a grand old conversation. Sawyer, how you doing, man?
Better than you, apparently. You're having trouble today.
Yeah, it happens. So normally this show's actually an hour later, so I'd be like an extra coffee deep. But Americans decided to change their clocks like a month earlier than everybody else. So yeah, we're starting the show a little bit earlier. Thanks, Sawyer.
It's literally the same exact time for me.
Yeah, it is. Not for everyone else though. Not for the rest of the world.
That's tough. That's tough.
Yeah,
tough.
it
Well,
is.
I'm excited for this one. I think there's a lot of traction in the agent economy, AI agents, etc. So pretty pumped. This one's going to be a little bit less agentic commerce-y and maybe a little bit more broad on AI, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm pretty pumped.
Hell yeah. So, Vito, why don't you give us a little intro about yourself, and then we can kick things off.
Yeah, 100%. So, hi, everyone. I'm Vito. I work on the DAI team at the Ethereum Foundation. The DAI team of the Ethereum Foundation does a bunch of things, but mainly is focused on AI security, privacy, and agentic economy as a whole. Plus, we do, of course, other things always aligned to the Ethereum Foundation mandate. Me personally, I'm the AI coordinator. The team is very small and it's kind of new. David Krapp is the head of AI, kind of founded it back in August last year. But we worked on things like 8004. That is one of the topics of today's conversation.
Hell yeah. And Sawyer, you've been playing around with 8004 a lot. And actually, you know what we'll do? Before I go over to Sawyer, Vito, why don't you give the people a little bit of an introduction into exactly what 8004 is?
Absolutely. This is going to be a long one. No, I will try to make it as short as possible. But 8004, so it comes from kind of a few problems that Davide, Marco, and other folks started noticing in the industry. So taking a step back, is a new standard, right? It was released the 29th of January. It's written by folks from Coinbase, Eric Rappel, from Jordan Ellis from Google, Marco De Rossi from MetaMask, head of AI at MetaMask, and Davide Krapp is head of AI at the Ethereum Foundation. I know that the official story, and it's a fun story, Davide was already thinking about agentic commerce and how agents talk to each other, how they work to each other. But he knew that there was like a big problem. The first problem is one that we all experience, right? When you want to decide which tool to use, but even just what API to use. You only have so many ways where you can find the right tool for you, whether it's asking your friends that already are using that tool, or it's like going on ChatGPT, so using an agent to tell you which one is the best tool for whatever you want to accomplish, or you go on Google. But these are kind of the ways. Or of course, you start trying them all, spend a bunch of money and see which one is best for you. This is already a big problem, and it's even a bigger problem if you're expecting agents to find the right tools for themselves. The other one is understanding the quality of these tools, right? Like, how do you know the quality once you have understood like what is the list of the tools that you can use? Well, the only way you have is literally trying them. Or like looking at reviews online, but with the possibility that some of these reviews might be fake, or the reviews are not like looking for the use case that you're actually trying to use that tool for. So all of these were a bunch of problems. On top of it, there were not like real identity attached to these agents. It was kind of early, so there wasn't really the concept of like the open cloud going out in the wild and doing things. But you already could see like that could become a problem. So they thought about 8004. 8004 at the core is a very simple standard. It's probably one of the simplest standards we have right now amongst all the ERCs. It's like 3 registries, 2 of which are already online. One is still not. It will go out, I think, at the end of this month, end of March, early April. So you have an identity registry, which contains all the information related to the agent, whether it's the name of the agent, the description, if it's X402 compatible or not, what are the services. And when I say services, I literally like mean any type of service. It can be A2A, it can be MCP, it can be an endpoint, but it can even be like an email, an ENS, a DID, and many different things. What are the skills? What is the domain? So identity registry is the identity of the agent. Now we can go more technical. Is a 721, is an NFT, is connected to it, but that's not really important. You just understand the identity registry is what makes the identity, stores all the identities of these agents. And then you have another registry that is the reputation registry, which contains kind of like the feedback of this agent. Now, the way I usually explain it is you can think of like Yelp stars or like Google business stars. The reality is that is a little bit more complete and comprehensive than that. It's much more similar to if you have like some experience on SEO, how Google ranks pages on the search engine results page, right? So you have the quality of the past operations, quality of pages, you have the latency, you have the uptime, you have multiple different things that then get aggregated and give like a overall high level score of that page, in this case of an agent. And then the third registry, which is the one that is not online yet, is a little bit more esoteric, but is like a way to validate the operations of this agent. Now, the way I like to think about this is think when you go on like ChatGPT and you send a message to 5.3, right? You don't really have a way to understand if you're talking to 5.3, 3.2, 4.1, like they have all the numbers, right? You can only trust the UI. Now, that's not a problem if you're using ChatGPT to know, hey, how do I cook this steak and make it like fantastic? It's much more of a problem if you're dealing with like high sensitive financial operations or like dealing with your health data and anything that is kind of private. You want to make sure that the setup of that AI is kind of like trustable. Without, of course, having like trust assumptions. That is something that we don't like, right, in our industry. So how do you do that? You use like a validation network. You can think it of like an Oracle network, where they can test the operations of this agent, replicate their setup, see what is the output, compare it, and make sure that what the agent is telling you is doing is actually doing. Now, taking a step back, the 8004 I told you it was going to be long.
No, man, you are 100. Nah, trust me, you are 100% fine.
But the thing is, with the 2004, we call it the trustless agent standard. I think that name is doing more harm than good in a way, because it's literally like the trustless service standard. It's not only for agents, it's for any service. It's for APIs that need to be found. Think about an example that I always make. Right now, when you want to build an agent, you need to put different tools. Think about a universal MCP that gets the request from the agent, goes on the identity registry, checks the service that does, I don't know, gives you the price of oranges, and checks the reputation and gives you the best service for the price of oranges at that price for that day. So that's what 8004 is, and these are the problems that it's solving.
Amazing. Oh man, there's so much to kind of dive into, but I think first of all, thank you for the detailed breakdown. The growth of the 8004 has been really exciting. I think one of the things that I think you guys have done really well is obviously it's an Ethereum Foundation backed initiative, but you haven't really denied anyone, right, who's wanted a deployment. And I think that's really important because there's so many developers building in so many ecosystems, Scale included, right, who want to contribute and be a part of this agentic ecosystem and community. My kind of first question for you, right, thinking about how there's all these chains and we have agents registering everywhere. Why does someone pick one chain over the other, right? Like why would someone pick Scale versus Polygon versus Ethereum versus Solana? Why should someone register on one versus the other? It's a question I've gotten quite a bit, and I have my own answers, but curious from your point of view, what's kind of the reasoning that someone may choose?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and I think you have like multiple separate reasons. One is probably like a practical reason and what is available on that chain, right? I mean, taking a step back, 8004 kind of tends to be multi-chain by default, because if you already look like at all these scanners, they're already exposing like APIs. Like 8004 Scan is one of them, which everyone thinks is from the Ethereum Foundation. It's not. It's a different company, but they're doing an amazing job. They have an API. You ping the API, and it gives you like a list of agents, not by chain. If you want, it's by chain, but it's usually just aggregated and ranked based on their own reputation registries. So that's not really the reason. I think different chains have different tooling that is available right now, right? One thing that I'm thinking is like X402 facilitators. X402 facilitators are not available on every chain, and that's a big component of this agentic economy, right? So you might want to pick the ones that have more facilitators, whether it's Polygon, whether it's Base. For example, on mainnet, we have very little, right? We're working now on getting more facilitators on mainnet. Now, why don't we have, and it kind of is like a trickle-down problem, like why don't we have lots of facilitators? Well, that's another thing that you want to consider when you're deploying your agent, is like probably gas fees, right? Your agent wants to transact a lot. It will transact a lot. You don't want to spend like hundreds of dollars on gas fees and on all these transactions. So you want to pick a chain that has probably high TPS, high transactions per second, and you want a chain that kind of like is affordable when it comes to gas fees. I think another reason is for sure like ecosystem, right? The different chains are putting different amount of efforts and prioritizing the agentic economy differently. And that means a lot. There is chains that are writing to me every single day being like, hey, how can we contribute to this? How can we work on that? Hey, we want to work on a watchtower. We can chat about watchtowers later, but we want to work on the reputation problem because it's a problem, right? So all of these is going to be probably a differentiator. It's already a differentiator when it comes to builders building on their own chain. And I think that the last reason is probably just like belonging, like which chain kind of reflects your personality more. That's always been a thing, right, in Web3. The Solana folks like Solana, not because sometimes he has better TPS or whatever, just because they grew up on Solana. So they want to stay on Solana. They know more people on Solana. So different reasons. Yeah, I think that's kind of my summary.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I think the one that I personally tend to use the most, I don't think it's necessarily true yet, I think it will be, is the cost of feedback. It's something that was raised very consistently in the Ethereum Magicians thread during the discussion around 8004, is the fact that posting feedback on chain, to your point, from a gas perspective, just doesn't really make as much sense on chains like Ethereum, where, yeah, it's more expensive, right? You're paying for a higher level of security. There's a much bigger validator ecosystem. And, for some things, it may not really be feasible or realistic. And so I think as we see more and more agents come online, as much as I love the scaling Ethereum roadmap, I do think that we're always going to have a place for this kind of growing ecosystem of chains supporting this, because it's just really not feasible that everything's going to run on one chain. It never really has been, in my opinion. But hey, that's just my 2 cents. That being said, I love the call out around availability of resources. This is something I think is really interesting and not thought about enough. Is how do we create an agent, right? How do we get an agent up and running? How does that agent stay alive? How do we know that agent's legit, right? There's all these things, that terrible word, things. There's all these things we have to think about when it comes to an agent. And, we're obviously in the early days, right? So we have things like the Watchtower. We have SDKs like Agent Zero. We have your CLI, the trusted, create trusted agent. We've got X402. We have all these resources. And I think what's, really great about 8004 is, in general, you can kind of stand up everything you need by yourself if you want to, but we're seeing these resources grow. Before we kind of jump into maybe some of the new things we've seen, what do you think is kind of the biggest missing piece right now from 8004? We've seen a lot of agents get stood up, but what are we missing to really see these agents, maybe become a bit more mainstream?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so multiple things is not one thing, is a lot of things, right? When we talk about agentic economy is a big word. Like, he has a lot of parties involved, right? Even the real world economy is a millions, billions of people coordinating each other to make it work. So the same thing is for agents. For the agentic economy to exist, you need different things. You need payment rails, whether it's X42, whether it's like something new that is going to come up, who knows? You need that. Again, you need identity, but you also need, again, ways to verify the reputation, right? Reputation right now is a problem, but it's not just a problem for 8004. If you ask the Google folks, hey, how do you deal with the feedback on Google Business? They're going to cry right away because it's a problem. And that's much easier to solve, right? Because it's like a walled garden and they have like all the moderation tools. They can decide who gets approved and who doesn't. Here we're talking about a completely open standard and everyone can leave reputation feedback. So how do you make sure that the reputation feedback, I mean, to give you an example, we released the 29th, the day after there were already companies selling feedback services where they're like getting paid to leave feedback for agents, which is ridiculous, but that happens, right? It happens on Yelp, it happens on Google Business, it happens in Web3. So how do you make sure that a feedback is legit? How do you verify who's leaving the feedback? How do you verify that the job really actually happened? How do you keep track of all the agents? So definitely there is a level of abstraction that needs to be built and is being built. We're setting up this thing called the Reputation Alliance, which is just like a number of teams that have been working or are working on like reputation systems. And they're building like in different ways. They all have their own thesis, their own testing, their own thesis. We have the concept of watchtowers that we mentioned before, where you have these, like, you can see them as cron jobs. Essentially, they are going to go agent by agent, pinging them, making sure that the agent is live, that the endpoint to that agent is actually reachable, and leave a feedback hint based on that. I think these two are definitely like the biggest ones. I think another one is making 8004 useful, right? So what it means is, you need actually useful services. You need useful agents on it. We have plenty of agents right now. I would say a good number of them is not useful. Like it's just like we have them because it's like the last shiny thing. Everyone loves the word agents, but we need like not only agents but agentic services that do things. And because of that, we were talking to companies that have already released, like Redstone and like Chainlink. Like we need the price feed on 8004 because we want agents to use it. So I would say feedback and services are the first ones, and then it's like a broader adoption. How do we get out of like our niche? Talk to the actual AI teams, to the actual like Visa of the situation, to the banks of the situation. What I can tell you though is that banks are like super excited. I've never seen banks so excited to work with like blockchains, like since we started talking about agentic economy, because they're all looking at agents. How do we make sure that agents are passing KYA, know your agents, AML regulations? Well, 8004 can do a bunch of things related to that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think to kind of maybe put a bow on that, there's a lot of things that just have to be kind of solved in tandem here. I think it's really interesting you call out the use of bit, like we need agents that actually do things properly. I need a rubber band so I can stop saying that word. That's terrible. But it's funny because that was actually one of the conversations I've been having with a lot of the teams building in X402 as well, is we see this this level of, call it like spam, right? And I mean, blockchains have always had this problem, right? Like if you look at Ethereum and Base, it's like a significant amount of the block space is quite literally filled up by just spam that is annoying in there. And so we've seen this with like with the ERC-80004 registry. There's all these agents that get created and they're just empty. They don't do anything. They just are there. They take up space. It's annoying, right? And then unfortunately, because of the design of most blockchains, it's not really feasible to filter them out on chain. So they filtered out off chain, but that's beside the point. But it's this question of what does the agent actually do? And it's a really interesting. It's really interesting because I think we, as an industry, we jump toward, hey, let's build agents. And there's this belief that, which I think kind of came from OpenClaw still. There's this belief that every agent will be autonomous and make money. And I personally don't agree with that. I think there will be agents that, are stood up and they're fully self-functioning. But I think the most valuable agents are ones that are almost like, your personal assistant style, right? I have all this information that comes to me every day, and I have all these things I have to do, rubber band. And it's just hard, right? Like the more the AI world grows, the harder it gets because we're just trying to play catch up all the time. And so I see like the personal agent being the number one type that gets created. And I think so far everyone feels like they want to create autonomous agents as part of the registry, but I haven't really seen people start to say, well, I can create a personal agent that is designed to be my public presence, put it on the registry, and then if people need to send me an email, right? My agent has an agent mail email, and people can send it to my agent inbox, or right, I have it has access to all these resources, and people can ping and pay to communicate and contact me, and my agent has these payment requirements to filter out spam. I haven't really seen that yet, but I think that could be a really big catalyst for growth, because I think it's so, like, to me, it feels obvious. I don't know about you, but I think everyone kind of would love a personal assistant, but it's not really feasible for everyone to have one. So maybe this is a way we get there. But yeah, not sure how you feel about that.
Yeah, like the yellow pages of personal assistants, right? You want to talk to Sawyer, you go on the 8004 scan and look for Sawyer personal assistant, and you have, absolutely. I think that's the thing about the 8004, right? Is a registry and is a directory. It's like a open Google, you can see as such, right? So you can register whatever you want, whether it is the agent that is your personal assistant and you want it there because you want people to find it, and maybe becomes like part of our culture to go on 8004 scan to look for your personal assistant before trying to spam you on Twitter, trying to reach out to you. It could be the service that just like wants to be found both by user and by agents, and wants like reputation and stars there. So there is a lot that can be done. I think I don't see if your agent doesn't fit in any of these categories, so it's not helpful for the public, it's not helpful to provide a service, and putting a user in contact with you is also service, right? It's not helpful to optimize your yield. It's not helpful to help you do groceries, to book an Uber and stuff. That probably shouldn't go on 8004. Like, it can stay on your Raspberry Pi, on your Mac Mini, in your house, and that's totally fine, right? Not everything needs to go there. Now, there's also like situations where just people register on 8004 because they want the cool number, right? Like you try and look at how many wanted the number one on each chain. We literally had the bots like sniping that up. That happens a lot, and it's totally fine. It's very early, but in many ways, like, it's not just with 8004, right? Even if you look at OpenClaw, and that's a big discussion on Twitter right now, lots of people went completely crazy on OpenClaw, but very little use cases, I would say, other like than personal agent. I've seen people spending tens of thousands of dollars because they wanted their agents to make money by themselves. I think one succeeded, and it was because it went viral on Twitter, not because their agent did anything crazy.
It's definitely funny, I think, because I get this question a lot, which is, how does blockchain truly derive value from this? And I think a lot of it, for me, comes down to, in the short term, I think the commerce pieces will be the easiest, because it's easiest to visualize and manifest this concept of my agent is paying for something. But to your point, and I think a lot of people agree here, we need agent first things. This is a totally separate topic that we won't go into a tangent on, because I could talk about it for hours, which is, I think a significant amount of the world is going to, I think, maybe not a significant amount of the world. I think a lot of the internet-based services, we will start to see new companies spin up that are just fully agent first, right? Agent mail is a great example. It's an API first email. There's a reason, I love the Google team. I love Google as a company, but like using OAuth with email is really hard when you're trying to run multiple agents. It's hard to bifurcate your email accounts and set that up securely and properly. You don't want to give it full access to your email. And so I think we're going to see a significant shift in that direction. And I think that will ultimately help back with your statement and what I agree with of we need more relevant things for the agents to consume. When that happens, it then again, I think becomes easier because to your point, maybe I've got one public agent and I've got 100 private agents that are doing all sorts of different things. Those agents can be transacting on chain. They could be leaving feedback and paying for things. They don't need to be registered. It doesn't matter. They're consuming and using blockchain as their primary consumption of identity and payment rails, but they don't actually need to be registered, right? The registry is, I think to your point, it's almost it's a great point. It's almost like the open page rank, right? It's like the new way of thinking about how we find and discover things, but we don't need every single thing on there. Rubber band. Here's I'm going to get myself one, but I digress. Anything else, Vito, there before we move on?
I wouldn't say so. Like, I think we kind of touched on everything. I just want to reiterate on the fact that if you have like an API, but even like the classic, weather API, that should probably go in 8,000. That's a great use case for 8004 because you get in a place where it can be discovered, that it can be used, you can be included in all the future developments. That's the interesting part, I would say, of 8004 is that really, like, if you get your API registered there and tomorrow creates this universal MCP, then your API is probably going to be the first ranking weather API in 8004. Great business opportunity.
I agree. I was actually talking with a couple of the weather teams, and man, there's a number of opportunities for people to help bring people to this because people outside of our little bubble are just it's hard, right? But beside the point, I actually have a question for you, and this is something I've been wondering a lot, and I've gotten others that ask me the question. So maybe you'll be able to help me answer this better in the future. 8004 does not require X402 as a payment mechanism. X402 is, I think, right now the most popular, and that's because I think X402 and 8004 are just very complementary. They both have a similar, I think, thesis of very simple, right? Like, as simple as possible, very extensible. But one thing you just said, which is interesting, and I haven't heard others say this, is you said register your weather API on 8004. 8004 to register is you're registering an agent identity, right? And so my question for you is, when we're thinking about onboarding people and explaining this to businesses, is it I'm registering a weather agent who then has these APIs and I'm calling the agent and they're then like, I'm saying, hey, what's the weather? And they're sourcing this information for me? Or is it purely as part of the discovery layer, all of their resources are embedded, and 8004 is actually the secret discovery layer that we didn't realize for X402 and agentic visas and things like that?
Absolutely the latter. So I wrote an article recently that is you're reading 8004 wrong, which is exactly about this. Because again, the title trustless agents kind of put the agent word subject in every single sentence when you're describing it. But if you look at the standard, if you look at the specs, there's really nothing that separates agent from just services. Right? You can, yes, add your agent if he has like an A2A endpoint, but you can just add your API. Because if you look at the services and the registration file, really, you have a name, which can be weather API. You have a description. This API gives you weather information of things about things. That is getting contagious, but of weather around the world. And then you have services. And within services, you can have HTTP endpoints, and that's it. You don't need anything else, and that's a totally legit spec-aligned registration. So yes, absolutely. If you don't need an agent, you don't need a weather agent. You just need your weather API, and then that weather API is going to be consumed by agents that are looking at the 1004 directory registry. But that's it. Yeah, no, it's not only for agents; it's also for pure services.
Makes sense. I feel like as a community, we should potentially think about we should think about changing the trustless agent thing out then, because what you're saying makes a ton of sense, and I agree. It kind of creates a maybe an interesting just point of confusion, because I have a couple of X402 merchant endpoints that I've been running, pretty lightweight and basic, but thank you for sharing that. But it's very interesting because I didn't think about using 8004 in this way. So yeah, it's kind of funny. But that being said, I want to talk a little bit about the commerce layer. So I think this is a good segue into it. So I've been reading 8004 wrong, clearly. That's okay, my bad. Maybe more directly, right? As we start to think about what are agents going to do? We're in this really chicken and egg situation where we need more, but in order to get more, we also literally need more, right? Like we need more services, we need more agents, but to get them, we need more of them. So we have people, trying and experimenting with use cases. Obviously, a lot of them fail. It's the way it goes, right? We're almost creating a dual-sided economy here with totally new rails, which is really cool. So as part of this, there's been a lot of questions around how traditional commerce flows work on chain. We've seen this on the X402 side. We've seen this being solved by the Zeoff team, who's introduced some refund capabilities. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the Stripe team has as well, with their new machine payments, introduced some refund stuff. I might be wrong though. And we've seen a couple others, focus on the refund side. There's also been some discussions around how to properly use escrows and, prepayment, almost subscription style. So we're starting to see people thinking, in my opinion, about the right needs to actually satisfy real commerce on chain, which is good, right? It's not everything in the world is just here's $1, give me it. Be nice if it was, but it's not realistic. You guys started working with the Virtuals team, and for those that don't know the Virtuals team, I would argue right now they're probably the leading agentic protocol in the world from an on-chain perspective. They've got the most volume, the most agents that I can see, and just overall really, really strong team. And you guys introduced a new ERC with them, 8183, which talks about the commerce layer. Would love an introduction to that, how it relates to 8004, X402, and then I have some fun stuff with our conditional transactions I would love to throw in there.
100%. So first, big shout out to the Virtuals team. We've been working with them for the last 2 weeks, and they're fantastic. First, they're always online, always receptive, really great team. So 8183, every time I call it 8138, I don't know why. 8183 was released yesterday. So it's very fresh. It's a spec that got proposed on the Ethereum Magician forum, so you can just go there and check it out. We can probably link it. And essentially comes from a thesis that is not really a thesis, it's just the reality of things, as you said, is not every transaction is a few cents. Not every transaction is I give you $1, you do this for me, and then we're done. See you later. It comes from the need to hook multiple components to these buy and selling kind of mechanisms. So what it does, it creates an escrow. So for those that don't know what is an escrow, essentially put money somewhere, they get locked until the job is completed. And then if the job is successfully completed, then these money are unlocked and sent to the seller. Now, how the money are unlocked is kind of the tricky part, because you need a 3-party / 4-party mechanism, right? You need a buyer, you need a seller, you need the escrow contract, but you also need someone that judges and validates whatever was the job and if it was completed correctly. And then potentially activates, refund mechanisms or disputes mechanisms and so on and so forth. So 8003 8183. Oh my God, I will never be able to say that. Essentially, what it does is it creates this escrow mechanism, makes it very, very easy, like 1004 is. It creates this four-party kind of way of transacting. Buyer calls the seller tells the price, you lock all the funds within an escrow, the job is completed, the validator, that is not the validation registry, is like a validator, whether it's a human or an LLM, validates the job is completed, unlocks the money, send them to the seller. Very simple. Again, author David Akrapis, together with the virtual team, released yesterday, put together in 2 weeks. I think it was the fastest ERC I've ever seen being put together. Of course, I mean, the virtuals team has been working on something similar for like ages. It's their ACP framework that we just like simplified to the bone and put it under the ERC. So that's the idea. It kind of creates an alternative to X402. X402 is great for small payments, fantastic, super fast, very easy to use. 8183 is fantastic for like bigger payments. They also need validation and might be prone to disputes and refunds.
Amazing. This is it's funny. Do I have this pulled up? Yes, I do. So I don't know who this individual is, but guy's name is JU from Pantera Capital. He wrote a tweet 2 days ago about X402 micropayments and how they won't scale in current form. He said the average X402 transaction is 9 cents. The average Visa transaction is $50. Visa processes 24,000 transactions per second for the same volume. We would need a chain that has 500x throughput of 12 million TPS. And then he said we need new batching or designs for agent scale. So it's funny because we always get into this argument in blockchain about needing more capacity, but the reality is we've never hit the capacity limit. It's just the truth. The only time we've ever come close to hitting the capacity limit is during market meltdowns when Ethereum gas prices spike, which is just, it kind of is what it is. If you really want to put your transaction through, then you're going to pay the premium. And that's just part of the deal we've agreed to. And we saw Solana go under some stress during the meme coin craze. Outside of that, I've never seen a blockchain actually hit its limits. I've seen for years people try to launch blockchains claiming TPS things, but it's been just irrelevant. Rubber band. That being said, the part that I love about this proposal is it's not concerned about TPS. It's finally concerned about something that actually matters, which is in a scenario where we need to move money in a specific way, this is aiming to approach that and find a solution. As part of that, I kind of have 2 items that I see. The first is, and I need to read through this spec because it literally popped up for me this morning. I don't know why Elon is not surfacing this information for me immediately. It obviously is what I want to read. But I want to say that it should be feasible to explore as it continues an X402 extension, just because that is the design of X402. So I personally am not an X402 maxi. I don't think everything needs to revolve around it. I think the nice part about it is it creates a really easy standard to onboard teams and companies into the agentic commerce world. And so that is something that I'll be very interested to see. And if that's not already been discussed with the virtuals team, would love to chat with you guys and work with you on that. Because I do think that's one of the things X402 has done a great job of is it is really easy to get a new merchant involved, right? We've taken most of the headaches out. Additionally, and this is something I'm curious your thoughts on, is privacy. I think the reason X402 hasn't really come under fire for this so far is because most of the payments being made are they're so small that I don't think people really care, and they're primarily agent wallets being seeded with a very small amount, right? If you're giving an agent wallet, let's just say $5, and the average transaction amount is 9 cents, that is 55.5 transactions, right? So if we look at the actual X402 consumption, which as of, again, just like off the cuff here, pulling it up live, in the past 24 hours, there's been 167,000 transactions, right? And there's been 4,000 buyers. These numbers are not massive. right? We're still in the early stages. And so these numbers aren't massive. And I think as we continue to grow, we see this split where maybe people want to start to trust their agent with these larger payments. But as that occurs, you now need to seed the agent wallet with more money, right? Like the agent literally needs more money. So as you start to put in more money, it's either sitting on more money or it's being delegated money from an account that potentially has more. And so now instead of, it's very common. A lot of us are developers. We all do the same thing. Binance, Coinbase, Kraken, Bybit, whatever your preferred exchange is, you pull $5 or $10 off. That way it's fresh. You throw it into a burner. Boom, your agent's funded. But the reality is there's a lot of people, most of us included, that have funds on chain. And we'd like to be able to use those funds to deploy out to our agents. The problem is, well, now everyone knows who that money came from because it's public. Curious if you see any issues as we start to think about these larger payments around privacy and confidentiality of the balances of both the humans and the agents.
100%. I think I started this conversation saying that on the AI team, we work on three things, right? Agentic commerce, agents privacy, and agentic security. Agentic commerce, we kind of touched on that for the past 30 minutes. We're on that, different components. Agentic privacy and AI privacy is a mess, is a big problem. Because when you want to start bringing up, remove the part on blockchain, right? We can work on that. I can mention the classic things like ZK proofs. Okay, great. We're going to implement that. I can mention the classic mixers, so you don't know where this money are coming from. There is multiple things you can do. There is the guys from Builder's Garden that created Siwa, which kind of creates a key store for your keys, which kind of separates the wallet from the agent. So the possibility of prompt injection kind of drops down drastically, which, by the way, prompt injection is a big problem. 22% from the latest study that came out yesterday from ZeroLeaks. 22% is a wild number if you think about it. But anyway, so multiple things that can be done there. We need better tools for agents. We need better tool for agents that can pay. And it's going to be a problem also for the banks because, if you can manipulate an agent, it means that that agent has full control over the medium of payment. And if the agent has full control, that's a risk by itself, right? So you need two-factor authentication, you need whitelisting, you need a full framework of tooling that needs to be created. Now, on top of it, AI per se is not even private, right? There's nothing private. Everything you tell an AI gets sent to, or if you're using Open Router, Open LLMs, it gets sent to Open Router, which, by the way, I love Open Router. I don't know if you know, the CTO of Open Router is the CTO, the previous founder of OpenSea. So they're super connected to Web3 and blockchain as well. So that's top of mind for them as well. If you're using Anthropic, then everything gets sent to them. If you're using ChatGPT, everything gets sent to the OpenAI. This is
everything. Wait. Everything.
If you send a message to your ChatGPT,
well,
everything,
everything and more. Wait, you don't even want to know about the things they're collecting that you don't know.
Cookies, the damn cookies. Gotta stop accepting
they
cookies.
Have historically flagged people to the FBI because they said something that was a little bit spooky. So yeah, no, everything. We literally went from, oh my god, social media know everything about me, to let me tell the darkest secrets I have to my ChatGPT instance at 3 a.m. in the morning, and we're totally fine with it. The problem is that the solution to this problem is a problem by itself, because to make inferences private, and maybe I'm diverging a little bit from your original question, but just because it's a systemic problem that we need to solve, that you have two ways. One is fully homomorphic encryption. We're not going to get into fully homomorphic encryption on this call, but just know that
we've gone through it many times.
I love it. Okay, so big shout out to the Zama guys. So you already know. I think your listeners already know what is fully homomorphic encryption, just a way to perform operation on encrypted strings. And another one is TEs, trusted execution environments. Now, with fully homomorphic encryption, if you talk to the folks at Zama, which, by the way, are the guys that invented fully homomorphic encryption in a way, they're researchers at least, there's no way we're gonna get that sorted in the next 10 years. The computational level is wild, it's like 10x. You cannot do things like, you know, cannot do divisions and multiplications on fully homomorphic encryption, which sounds like a little thing, is massive if you want to run inferences. The other one, again, is TEs. The problem with TEs is that you can branch attack them. So you can just go to the physical TE that is running the inferences and kind of download all the data. So I know for sure that this is genius, in my opinion. There is companies that are planning to shoot TEs in space, because that way no one can go and connect to the TE. So to answer your question, that's a problem. It's a problem 360 degrees with AI. Don't tell your darkest secrets to OpenAI and Anthropic. Run your local model. That's probably the only way to solve it right now, even if it's a shitty model, of course. But yeah, I mean, if we want now to have an agent that has like millions of dollars in a wallet, just make sure that it has a multi-sig, and you have to confirm every signature, and accept the fact that everyone will see that your agent has a ton of money in the wallet.
That's also another great point as well, as to why, you know, obviously with the you know, the likes of OpenCloud and things like that, the thing that everyone went to first was trading, you know. And I guess like another thing as well, when using these you know, third-party LLMs and providers and things, I mean, they should be able to also see like if there was a rogue employee, right, and you were running everything through OpenAI or something, they could technically have access to your wallet, right?
If the key somehow winds up in the prompt, then yes, that's why. Like in the information that gets injected, that's why like most of the usage of wallets ideally comes through a tool, right? Because the provider should not be able to see what occurs behind the scene of the tool. However, again, it depends on how you're doing this. So like there's a lot of nuance here, let's put it that way, because even like for example, I've seen people try to do where they have a local private key on with an agent, and then they're trying to use like cast from Foundry to execute transactions. And the problem is every time they make a transaction, the private key is actually in the prompt, because the prompt is the CLI request. So it's like my 2 cents there is, don't store keys on the machine directly, or at least if you are, you need to be able to rotate them constantly, like a secret, because you just have to assume it's exposed. If you're not assuming it's already exposed, then you're like, at some point, you're probably going to lose. Is that fair, Vito?
Yeah, 100%. Like your agent shouldn't be able to see the private key. That's a no-no.
Yeah. Vito, I have a question. So I want to share something with you and our audience of however many people may be watching today, and then I want to kind of just pulse check and see what you think about this. So this is my scale show for the day. We've been thinking a lot about privacy, and you know, a lot of the members of the Scale team are, you know, many members have been in crypto for a very long time, you know, and so no one here is against any of the privacy protocols, right? Like we respect that people want to experiment and have the level of privacy they feel comfortable with. However, we recognize from a business perspective, some of the protocols that exist have gone through various levels of regulatory sanction. They may not be compliant, et cetera, et cetera. Again, not discussing legal items. What I want to focus on is what we can do today, right? Many of these things are not functional for an enterprise to come and say, I want to deploy AI agents that move money on my behalf. They're just like, they can't use those, right? There's no proof point that they can legally. And so we've been thinking a lot about that. And I want to argue that we were one of the first teams to start talking about confidentiality. I won't say names of who may have taken that from us, but it's all good. I like that people picked it up. That was the point. Confidentiality is key. We call it the barista test, where it's, you should be able to do actions where the action shares enough information to get executed, but the barista, the person serving the coffee, or, you know, the waiter, or the person you're working with here should not have access to your bank account. They shouldn't be able to see your full transaction history or like all these things, right? That's that level of confidentiality that we ideally expect in society today. If you have a credit card, when you spend your credit card, people can't see what's in your bank account, right? It's just that simple. And so we actually have this new, relatively similar to Zama. We can kind of call it a new token standard. But we aim to be as close to ERC-20 as possible. We call them confidential tokens. This is actually available right now in our sandbox. We've got some teams we're working with that are testing it. And what it allows you to do is actually have a shielded balance, right? So for example, I can take 100 USDC, I can have it be encrypted, and now I can move that 100 USDC around. People can see that I'm sending it to someone else, but they can't see how much I'm sending. That balance and that value stays encrypted from my wallet through the transaction to that other person's wallet, and only gets decrypted when it's decrypted. Right? You can decrypt your own balances locally because obviously you need to see it. For compliance reasons, you could decrypt your transactions, but the actual balances stay private. Our belief is that this is a necessity for agentic commerce. And there are a lot of teams aiming to do this. We've seen some good stuff come out from the Tempo team. We've seen some good stuff come out from the ARC team. We've seen some cool stuff recently come out from Stellar. And of course, the Zama team as one of the OGs in the space. But the reality is no one's really hit this in production yet outside of Zama. And Zama is only on Ethereum right now. Curious on whether that's something you believe, both as part of just both transfers, X402 payments, and possibly this new 8183 standard. If you think it will be, I don't know, maybe something that could be, let's call it a default for agents moving forward.
I mean, I can say it should, absolutely should. Like, privacy is extremely important. We talk about this. Like, if you talk with Vitalik today, like, that's the first thing he's going to tell you. It's going to be, hey, how are you doing? Privacy is important, like, obsessed about it. It comes with a bunch of issues, though, because what I think it was Vitalik that said something similar, is like privacy is hygiene, and it requires education, right? It requires education because people want default to privacy automatically. Because the problem with privacy is that it usually comes with frictions. So I think for sure we need to do a good job of making it as frictionless as possible. But also we need to all together make sure that we educate the people, right, about the importance of it. Not just, of course, like talking specifically about these tokens. It's important that you don't have to disclose your total value, your total net worth every time you make a payment. That's key. That's expected. That's how it should be. It's important that I don't get all of my movements and purchases tracked, because it could be a problem, even like a social engineering kind of problem, right? At that point, someone knows what I'm looking for, what I'm purchasing. Let's say that I start by, I don't know, pregnancy tests. Now everyone knows that I'm waiting for a baby, like things like that. That's important to keep them private. And the more blockchain, the more this kind of like payments will become popular and common, the more we need to make sure that this is taken care of. But taking a step back is about everything. Privacy should be the default for everything. It should be the default when I'm sending a message to my ChatGPT. It's wild that it knows everything that I'm thinking. It should be the default when literally when I'm using my phone. It shouldn't be tracking everything I'm doing. So to answer your question simply, I'm very much into like this kind of privacy tokens and privacy overall 360 degrees. I do think though that most of the times privacy teams do a no-full job at dealing with the user experience and explaining privacy to the normies, because they're gigabrains, right? Like super smart people, so they don't even know to speak to the normies. Not non-gigabrain people, but people that don't think about privacy. For sure. And developer experience need to be very smooth as well, of course.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. It's one of the things that we're definitely seeing right now is it is impossible to create a end-to-end privacy token based on the ERC-20 standard. It's just like it is impossible. It's not. You need information additionally that's just not feasible. We've gotten about as close as we think we can, and I mean, there's definitely limits to compatibility that pop up almost immediately. We know the Zama team's dealing with the same issue. It's just like nothing works out of the gate. But definitely agree with that. One of the things that I'm really excited about is in the last 3 weeks, we saw this shift from MCP to skills and CLI. Kind of exciting because it opens up the door for, I think, some really a lot easier developer experiences and agentic experiences, where we no longer have to try to force everything behind the scenes through a tool. We can now actually just say, like, run this operation when you want to encrypt something, and it just works. So pretty excited. We've got some really cool things coming. Vito would definitely love to chat with you more offline about, you know, our confidential token, but that is something we're pretty pumped to see right around the corner. And I think we'll we haven't been doing privacy for 10 years like the Zama guys. Technically longer, since a lot of those guys are like career cryptography people in privacy. This is obviously something a little bit more recent for us with our Byte protocol. So this is definitely something we're very interested in seeing on the agentic commerce front. So if you are listening and you're interested in building, agents that have a little bit more privacy by default, things like that, definitely make sure to reach out to any one of us. We're happy to chat with you and see how we can support and get you using our new stuff. But I'm being screamed at. We're about at time here, unfortunately. Falcor.
I love how you tell people to contact anyone, and then I get Telegram messages like, "Oh, hey, I want to know da 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 da," and I'm like,
"Okay, fine."
And I'm like, "Bro, I don't even know what half of those words mean."
Contact me or Vito. Don't contact Falcor. If you want to contact Falcor, don't do it.
You can do it. Just don't expect a response that's going to help you with your problems.
You could just tell people, "Hey, talk to that guy instead." That would be acceptable.
I do. I say that.
Well, they must be terrible following up.
And they're like, "Oh, but Sawyer told us to talk to you," and I'm like, "No, go talk to Sawyer." And then
I don't tell people that.
Oh, you just did like 2 seconds ago. Guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of SKALE School. Vito, absolute pleasure having you on, my friend. It has been awesome diving deep into ERC-80004 and everything else that is coming out of the Ethereum Foundation and that really cool new thing with virtuals as well. But, we are at time. It's been a pleasure having you. Anything final before we kick things off?
No, thank you for having me. That was fantastic. If you want to dive deeper into 8004, go on 8004.org. We have all the information there. Reach out to Falcor. 100%. He will answer all of your technical questions. And again, thank you for having me. And
coming back, Vito will not be. Guys, thank you so much. And we will see you next week for another episode of SKALE School. Goodbye.